This setup has changed quite a bit since the last time I made a video like this, and there are some exciting brand new additions that I really want to show you. So I'm going to go over my complete updated desk setup as of July 2025, and I'll try to have links for every single thing that I mention in this video down in the description. They are affiliate links, and most of them will go to Zounds, which is of course a great place to buy your studio gear. Let's get into it. So my ongoing goal for this entire studio, but specifically my desk, is to maximize flexibility and minimize friction. Unfortunately, music isn't my full-time gig, so when I have an idea for a track, or I get a session gig, or even when I come in here to make these videos, I don't have a ton of time to kill. Things really need to be as accessible and within reach as possible, but I also have to keep things very clutter-free to avoid getting stressed out. Let's start with the Apollo X4 because I ended a recent video on a bit of a cliffhanger and haven't said much about it since. I just got this thing, and funny enough, I bought it brand new, but it's not the Gen 2 version. This is actually the Apollo X4 Heritage Edition, which all that really means is that it's a Gen 1 that comes with a bunch of extra plugins. I think Universal Audio is phasing these out right now since the Gen 2 has been out for a while, but the newer version is not all that different than the Gen 1. The Gen 2 has auto gain for the Unison preamps and probably another thing or two that didn't matter too much to me. But this was on sale for just a couple $100s more than the Apollo Twin X Gen 2, and you get more I/O, more DSP, and you get ADAT in and out. The ADAT is actually going to this Behringer ADA8200, which, to be honest, is serving me well. I imagine I'll get something nicer eventually, but it's doing what it needs to. This adds 8 ins and 8 outs to my Apollo, and most of the time I just have instruments that stay plugged in until someone comes over and I need to use the inputs for something else. The pre's are actually not bad. There is some slight crosstalk across the inputs, which is pretty faint, but worth a mention. Right now I'm only using a few of the outputs to go to this little headphone amp, which is another Behringer unit. It's called the HA400. That allows me to send a custom headphone mix out of UAD console, and that mix can be sent to up to 4 people, and it doesn't take up one of the headphone outs on the Apollo itself. I really enjoy using these Shure SRH 440s. I've been using these for several years now, definitely since before I even had any studio monitors. But I eventually settled on the Yamaha HS5s. Classic. These sound great, and I pair them with a little Mackie sub, and to be real with you, a lot of the time I don't even use the sub in this space. Now let's talk about controllers, because this stuff is pretty cool. Firstly, I have this Stream Deck Mini, which I did a whole video about, but basically you can assign each of these buttons to have different functions, and it can even send MIDI information to your DAW. Sometimes I even like using it as a little Spotify mini player, and it even shows the album art there, which is pretty sick. And stowed away in this shelf is my trusty Novation Launch Key Mini. This is an older version of the Launch Key Mini, but it still works great for my setup and was actually gifted to me by an old coworker. Shout out to Logan for being a cool dude. And this is my prized possession. This is the Softtube Console 1 Mark III, and not only can I control Logic with it, but it gives me one-to-one control of plugins from Softtube and UAD, and it even works with FabFilter and Plugin Alliance stuff. But it also has a mode where you can control UAD console for people who have Apollo interfaces. Just this past week, I made some side panels out of scrap plywood and some fake leather from Walmart. I used to do stuff like this for airplane interiors, so it was kind of fun to get back into that craft for a moment. Unfortunately, I angled it just enough to fit under the shelf so that the shelf could pull out, but then I put some anti-slip feet on the bottom of it, which made it slightly too tall to go under. But I'll also say that this was a complete accident. Look at how perfectly this fits in between these grooves. Chef's kiss. I've never talked about these on the channel, but they're a very important part of my process. I'm using a ProtoArc K300 keyboard, which has a bit of a satisfying clicking sound, but it's not overly loud. And this is a Logitech MX Master 2S. It feels really good, and pretty much every control on here is customizable. Also, both the mouse and keyboard can connect to multiple devices at a time. So sometimes I'll jump over to my iPad while I'm exporting something on my computer, and I can quickly press a button on each of these and it'll switch over to controlling my iPad. And this is an LG ultra-wide monitor. I don't remember the exact model, but I'll link it down below. This was definitely one of the more budget-friendly ultra-wide monitors, but it looks great and gives me a lot of real estate when I'm working in Logic. And everything in my studio is connected to this little M1 MacBook Air. I believe I've had this since 2021, and when it came out, people were saying, no, you need to get a MacBook Pro if you're gonna do any serious music production. The main difference at the time was that the Air didn't have a fan, but the Pro did. And with my confined budget, it made way more sense to get 16 gigs of RAM on a MacBook Air than to settle for 8 gigs of RAM on a MacBook Pro. And to this day, I don't struggle with latency, and I've never felt like I needed something more powerful for music production. And nowadays they're on like M4 processors or something like that, which is supposedly way better. Some other cool stuff that I have. This is in literally every video that I make and probably every song that I release. It's the Universal Audio SD1, and it's like a more affordable SM7B. It comes with mic modeling software, which I very rarely use, but it also came with the UA Essentials plugin bundle, which I use quite a bit. I record pretty much everything into this microphone, and I have it attached to my desk via this pretty cheap InnoGear boom arm. I just found this thing on Amazon, and it makes things really easy to move up and down or around when I'm doing stuff at my keyboard. In most cases, it's way better for me than a traditional mic stand. And this is an analog drum synth called the Amatec AR110. It's a very straightforward synth, and it's cool to have something that's always plugged in and ready to record, and I don't have to worry about sound selection because there's only one set of sounds on this thing. And since it's pretty much always on my desk, I'll go ahead and mention it. I shoot video with a Sony ZV-E10 and a Sigma 16mm lens. It's a pretty affordable video setup, and I personally think that it looks pretty good. And last couple things here, Abby got me this little MagSafe charger as part of my Father's Day gift, and I think it's one of the coolest cheap gadgets because I could just pop my phone on there and it'll charge it. But if I put my phone on there sideways, it actually has this cool little focused display where you can choose to have a clock and your reminders or the weather. I think also keeping my phone out of my pocket but not laying right on my desk directly in front of me helps me to focus on what I'm doing and not randomly grab it to see what's going on. And then I have this oil diffuser, which has a nice woodsy smell to it without having to ignite an open flame in my studio like I would with a candle. I have some other cool gadgets around the studio, but I thought I'd keep it simple and focus on just my desk setup where I spend the most time. And after doing this video, I realized there are a lot of things mentioned here, and I will do my very best to link everything in the description. And if you happen to purchase anything at all through those links, it does go a long way in supporting what I do on this channel without you having to pay any extra money to do so. Also, if you have any questions at all about any of this gear or you want to see more videos on any of it, definitely let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to keep watching, here are a couple videos that YouTube thinks you'll like. And as always, thanks for hanging out.